Good day. I'm Bigfoot. I'm 29 years old and live alone in a tiny, quiet community just outside Denver. I have a stable job. I work in logistics for a medium-sized company. And things have been relatively pleasant lately. Not perfect, but good. I recently experienced a breakup. We were together for a few months, nothing too long, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. I thought it could be heading somewhere. It turned out it wasn't, but you go on. I'm not the type of man who lets one thing ruin everything. I have my house Sunday football and come on, that means a lot. Anyway, it was Sunday morning, one of those lazy, peaceful days when you don't have anything pressing to do. So, you finally get around to tidying up your space a little. I was in that type of mood. Music on low, windows open, and it's just me in the vacuum. I really enjoy it. It clears my mind. After I finished inside, I put out the trash, just ordinary things. And that's when I noticed her, Melissa. She lives across the street, always has. She was sitting on the edge of her lawn in an old sweater and slippers, clutching a coffee mug as if it weighed 100 pounds. I don't know, but she appeared to have not slept well in weeks. It was the first time I'd seen her without makeup, and she still looked lovely, but not in the normal manner, in a human sense. We had always had a neighborly relationship, nothing more. I'd helped her fix her garage light once. She brought me cookies during the holidays. Just friendly. She's married with 2 children and appears to have a picture-perfect family. At least that's what I assumed. I waved. "Good morning," I said. She looked up slowly as if she had just realized where she was. "Hey," she responded. Then her voice lowered somewhat. "Bigfoot, may I say something strange?" I paused. "Sure," I replied. "You okay?" She shook her head and stared me dead in the eyes. I can't keep this in any longer. For a split second, I had no idea what she meant. I even chuckled, albeit awkwardly. "What exactly?" I asked, trying to keep things light. She looked down at her mug. "I don't want to discuss anything here, but I need to, and I don't have anyone." I halted. "Would you like to come over for a bit?" I said, "I can make coffee. Alternatively, crack a beer. Whatever you prefer." She paused, looked toward her house, then back at me. 10 minutes later, we were sitting on my back porch. The sun was warming up, and the birds chirped as if it were any other lazy Sunday. I handed her the beer, sat across from her, and said nothing. She took a sip, then another, and then she began speaking. At first, just generalities: how busy life had become, how hard it was to raise children. I nodded without saying much, but then she dug deeper. She told me that she hadn't felt properly loved in years, that her spouse, whom I had always considered to be Mr. Perfect, no longer paid her much attention. "He vanishes," she said. "Sometimes for entire weekends he claims it's work, but I'm not foolish." She stared me in the eyes. "I believe he's cheating on me. I can't verify it, but I feel it." She stated that the house felt like a museum. Quiet, cold. The only time she felt noticed was when she looked in the mirror and reminded herself that she still existed. I've stayed because of the children, but I'm starting to think I'm teaching them the incorrect lesson. I wasn't sure what to say. I actually didn't. I'd always considered them to be among the best. You know, the type couple jogs together and publishes holiday pics with identical sweaters. Honestly, I said I had no idea. "You always appear joyful," she grinned wryly. "That's the trick. Smile enough and no one will look too closely." We talked for several hours. She wept once, but not loudly. Just a silent, exhausted tear slipped down her cheek like it had done before. I mostly listened. Eventually, she got up. "Thank you," she said. "I didn't intend to throw this on you." "You didn't," I replied. "You only needed to let it out." "That's okay." She nodded, dried her eyes, and departed. I remained there for a bit after she left, trying to digest what I had just heard. Not because I wanted to be involved. That wasn't my place, but it made me realize how little we know about the folks who live just 10 feet away. That night, I didn't watch the football game. I just sat and thought. It had been roughly 2 weeks since our chat on my back patio. Melissa hadn't stopped by, texted, or waved across the street. Just silence. I didn't think much about it at first. Perhaps she felt ashamed about opening up. Or perhaps things had settled down at home. In any case, I assumed it was one of those times that occurred, became heavy, and then passed. I returned to my usual work, workouts, football repeat. I spent more time outside as the weather warmed up. I mowed the lawn, fixed a leak under the kitchen sink, even began reading again in the evening, something I hadn't done for months. But even in the peaceful moments, I couldn't stop thinking about her. Not in a romantic manner, just wondering. Then one afternoon when I pulled into my driveway after work, I noticed Ron, my older neighbor, from 2 doors down standing by his mailbox. I rolled the window down and waved. "Hello, Ron. How's it going?" He strolled up and leaned on the mailbox as if it were a part of him. "Have you heard about the Sandersons?" he inquired, indicating toward Melissa's home. I shook my head. "No." "Why?" He looked around as if someone was listening. "She's filed for divorce. Papers were submitted last week. She said she'd been done for a time." I froze. That was quick. But then I remembered what she'd said on my porch. She probably didn't make that decision overnight. Perhaps that night when she opened up, she had finally reached the point of no return. I thought they were solid. Ron shrugged. "Everybody did. That goes to show you, doesn't it? Never really know what's going on inside someone's home." He was correct. You observe 2 adults happy on their order barbecuing, walking their children to school, and you believe that's the entire story, but it isn't. It never is. That evening I sat on my porch with a beer watching the neighborhood wind down. Children were playing with scooters. Somebody barbecued hot dogs down the street. A dog barked at a squirrel as if it were personal. But Melissa's house remained stall. Lights off, curtains closed. Later that week, I saw her again. I was heading out of the grocery shop when I noticed her approaching her car, a bag of groceries in each hand, and her keys just hanging from one finger. I hesitated before calling out, "Do you need a hand?" She turned and smiled slightly. "Bigfoot, hello." I volunteered to carry the luggage, and she didn't decline. We walked to her car silently. "I heard about everything," I responded cautiously. She didn't flinch. "Yes, word goes around." We stood there for a second, unsure what would happen next. Then she looked at me and murmured, "Thank you for that day. You didn't make it weird. You just listened." I said, "You didn't make it weird either." She grinned again, this time, a little more realistic. That Saturday, she arrived at my door. I was watching a game with chips and a beer on the table. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I opened the door wearing a t-shirt and socks. "Hello," she said. "Sorry for dropping by now. Could you assist me move the kids' bunk beds? I'm rearranging their room. This feels like something I can handle right now." "Sure," I said without thinking twice. "Just give me a second." I grabbed my shoes, accompanied her across the street, and spent the next hour attempting to disassemble an IKEA nightmare that had most likely been assembled during an already failing marriage. She didn't speak of much, just provided me tools and held the parts in place. It wasn't weird. It wasn't too sentimental. It was simply usual. Before I left, she asked, "Might I repay you with coffee tomorrow morning? I make a good French press." "That sounds fine," I said. And that's how it began. Over the next few weeks, tiny things continued to happen. She would wave from the porch more frequently. I'd find a paper bag of cookies on my porch with a note saying, "Too many. Please help me consume them." She'd occasionally summon me to assist her in repairing a drawer, lifting a box, or inspecting a faulty bulb. Sometimes she didn't actually require assistance. I could tell, but I didn't mind. Then came Sunday morning. I was back to my usual cleaning routine, throwing away rubbish, and she was sitting on her porch just like the previous time. But this time, she wasn't sad, simply thoughtful. She smirked as she remarked, "You're making it a habit to take out trash on Sundays." I said, "I've got to keep the routine alive." She paused. "I'm delighted you're here, Bigfoot." I gazed at her. She wasn't fishing for anything, simply expressing it. And I sensed a shift within me. Not an attraction, not obligation, just a calm realization that being present for someone doesn't always require huge gestures or dramatic confessions. It's about turning up consistently when they least expect it. I nodded. I agree. That night, I went to bed with her comments on my mind. Not because I assumed it meant something more, but occasionally the unexpected happens softly and stays. On a Thursday evening, I finally resolved to say something. Melissa had been stopping by more frequently in recent weeks. Initially, it provided limited assistance with minor issues. A drawer wouldn't close a leaking hose, a light bulb that needed replacing, and I didn't mind. Actually, I didn't. But lately, she's been stopping by just to talk, to check in. Sometimes with a bottle of wine, other times with takeout. There was this look in her eyes, not flirtatious, not demanding, simply expectant, as if she were waiting for me to take a step forward. But I didn't, not that I didn't care, but I was unsure how I felt or what she required from me. That night, she knocked around 7:30. I had just finished dinner. Grilled chicken leftovers, nothing fancy. She wore her hair up loose sweatshirt once again. No makeup. She appeared relaxed in a way I hadn't seen previously. Or perhaps I hadn't noticed. "Hey," she said, holding up a bottle. "I suspected you might be bored." I smiled sweetly. Not quite bored, but I wouldn't say no to company. She strolled in as if she belonged there. Not harshly, just comfortable. As if it had developed a rhythm, me and her at the end of the day talking about nothing. We sat on the back porch. She poured 2 glasses, handed me one. The sun was lowering over the edge of the neighborhood. Everything remained still peaceful. She talked about her children, how they were adjusting, how her youngest had been having nightmares lately. She seemed fatigued when she said that. "I'm really tired." I listened, nodded, responded when I could, but something was always tugging at the back of my mind. After a time, I put down my glass and leaned forward. "May I ask you something?" I said. She looked over, taken off guard. "Sure, I've noticed that you've been around more." I started cautiously, "And it's been lovely, but I don't want to misunderstand anything." Her expression didn't change significantly, maybe a tad softer on the edges. "What do you think you're reading?" she asked. I think I spoke slowly. "You're lonely, and I understand that. I really do. But I'm not sure what you're hoping for here." She didn't say anything immediately, just stared down at the deck beneath her feet, then looked up at me. "I've spent the last 6 years trying to be someone's wife, attempting to solve everything discreetly, trying not to ask too much. In the end, I felt like I was the only person there." She took a breath, "And now it's over. I realize how much I've stopped feeling. I don't want a replacement, Bigfoot. I simply want to feel seen again. And while I'm with you, I do." That struck me. Not in a romance movie way, just in a real way. She wasn't chasing anything. She wasn't attempting to seduce or manipulate. She was only reaching out in the only manner she knew how. "I hear you," I said. "And you're a good guy, stronger than I thought. But I'm not prepared for something serious. I recently got out of something too. And it was much lighter than what you've gone through." She nodded slowly. "I'm not asking for anything serious. I'm requesting presence, or that left me speechless." So I simply glanced at her. Then I reached for the glass again. We sat in silence for a while, not tense, just processing. Before she departed, she turned toward the door. "Thank you for being honest," she said. "You too." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes this time. Then she was gone. The following few days were quiet. She didn't text. I didn't stop by. Her home felt like a locked shell again. Perhaps that should have felt like relief, but it didn't. Saturday, I saw her in the driveway with her 2 children packing goods into the trunk. I waved. She waved back, but things weren't the same. I told myself that I had done the correct thing, maintaining boundaries, staying clear. But part of me despised how her wave appeared smaller. The fact is, I enjoyed her company. I liked hearing about her kids, her day, her comments on the movies we both feigned to dislike. I appreciated the peaceful understanding we shared, the comfort of not having to pretend. And now it had paused. I felt its loss like a missing link in my routine. That Sunday around dusk, I was back on the porch. No music, no game, just myself in the breeze. And then out of nowhere, I heard steps. She was standing on the edge of my porch steps, wearing a hoodie, holding a little plastic jar in both hands. "I prepared too much pasta," she said. "Want some?" I stood open the screen door and stood aside. "Always," I responded. She walked inside, placed the container on the table. We didn't chat much. We didn't need to. It wasn't a restart. It wasn't a moment. It was just simple. That night as she departed, she said something that stayed with me. You understand? And I keep telling myself that this is nothing. But maybe it's just what I need. There's nothing more, nothing less, and only one question. I didn't feel the need to define it either. Being present for others on occasion quietly, honestly, is sufficient. It had been a few more weeks. Melissa was standing at my door with that container of pasta. Since then, we had developed this quiet, unspoken rhythm. She would come over once or twice a week, sometimes with leftovers, sometimes with coffee, sometimes with nothing but her presence. And every time it seemed more natural than the last. We didn't call it anything. We didn't discuss what it was, but there was something. It was now part of both of our daily routines. I began to notice little differences. She laughed louder, not the forced type, the kind that slips out before you know it. She wore her hair down more frequently. We talked about books again. She even mentioned researching online courses, something about interior design just to investigate. And me, I was also changing slowly without intending to. I was looking forward to her knocks. I checked the porch more frequently when she wasn't around. I missed her company, her calm, her ability to discuss important issues without turning them into drama. One Thursday night, she arrived just as I was finishing dinner. No warning, just a faint knock, and she's standing there with a bottle of iced tea and a worn smile. I needed to leave the house, she said. The children are spending the night with their father. I nodded and moved aside. Come inside. We sat on the porch as usual. This time, however, her quiet had weight. She didn't get into stories or vent about anything. She simply glanced at the trees, the sky, the street. She appeared to be attempting to express an unnamed emotion. After a while, I asked gently, "Is everything okay?" She nodded. "Yeah, I really didn't want to be alone tonight." Something about the way she stated it stuck with me more deeply than I expected. We sat quietly for a long time after that. The following morning, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about football in a week. That night, Melissa called me about 8. "Hey," she said, "sorry, this is just random. The back faucet is leaking again. Do you think you could have a look?" I replied, "I'd come straight over." She opened the door before I could knock. Flashlight already in hand. We spent the next 30 minutes messing with the outflow, laughing about how useless the handbook was. At one point, she leaned in to keep the base of the faucet steady. And for a moment, we were just close, not in a romantic manner. Only two persons working together, feeling at ease in each other's presence. After we repaired it, she made us coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, an uncommon change of scenery. The place was silent. The kids were already asleep upstairs. The house, however, the same one I had seen from across the street for years, felt different. Inside, lived in personal real. We talked for longer than usual that night concerning topics we hadn't previously addressed. Childhood recollections, regrets, our former selves, and the individuals we were still striving to be. At one point, she stared at me and asked, "Do you ever feel like you're wandering through your own life?" I thought for a moment, then answered honestly, "Yeah, especially following the breakup." I kept convincing myself I was okay, but some days I'd find myself staring at the wall for 10 minutes without recognizing it. She smiled sadly. "That's exactly what it feels like. I feel like I've been living sideways for years." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. We just sat there quietly, understanding. That weekend, something changed. She began texting more small things. "Discovered this music. I thought you would like it. Do you know of a decent site to install shelves? Would you like to come over?" I prepared too much pasta again. And I didn't push back. I responded. I went. I remained longer. One afternoon, I went to the hardware store to obtain a part for my shed door, and I found a set of lawn lights on sale. I thought of her backyard, how gloomy it always seemed in the evenings, and I purchased 2 sets without thinking. That night, I arrived with the lights in a drill. "I figured your children might enjoy a little illumination in the backyard," I said. She gazed at me as if I had given her the moon. "You didn't have to." "I understand." We installed them together. The children assisted. When the sun went down, The garden was illuminated with a lovely warm glow that made everything feel softer. Her kid hugged my leg before returning inside. Her son inquired if I would be available for movie night on Friday. And Melissa, she simply looked at me, something unspoken in her eyes. That's when I knew I had unintentionally crossed a line, not a romantic one, an emotional one. This wasn't just about aiding a neighbor anymore. Later that night at home, I sat on my couch and pondered about everything about her laughter, her stories, her peaceful way of sitting close to me without filling the room with noise. And I realized something unsettling. She was beginning to mean to me more than I had planned, more than I imagined I could bear again. Especially with someone whose life was so full of actual weight and responsibility. 2 kids, a divorce, years of misery. I wasn't sure I could carry all of that. I wasn't sure if I should attempt, but I did know one thing for sure. I wasn't prepared to let go. Not yet. Summer slowly gave way to early autumn. The neighborhood altered with the season's trees turning gold at their tops, children riding to school in light jackets, porch lights turning on a little earlier each night. Life progressed as it always does. Melissa was still in it. We never defined what was going on between us. Never sat down to sketch lines or give it a name, but we were spending time together consistently, comfortably, quietly. She would come by after putting the kids to bed. I'd stop by her house with groceries, tools, or simply because, she asked. Weekends faded into late evenings. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners turned into extended discussions on the back porch. We weren't dating, but we weren't strangers. Whatever it was, it worked for both of us. Still, there were times when I found myself halting and wondering where this was headed. I would gaze at her and wonder, am I prepared for all of this? The answer wasn't always yes, but it wasn't a no either. We were in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon putting together an old fire pit I had purchased from Facebook Marketplace. Melissa was reading the directions upside down and making caustic remarks. The kids were with their father for the weekend. It was just us. As I tightened a bolt, I looked over and said, half joking, I didn't expect to be spending my fall evenings building backyard furniture with my neighbor. She looked up and grinned. Neither did I, but here we are. And just like that, I understood how normal everything had become, how much room she had created in my life without pressing it. She didn't demand attention. She didn't ask me to be more than I was. She just showed up. And somehow that had been enough to bring me closer than I had thought. A few days later, we sat at her kitchen table after dinner. The children were upstairs half asleep. The dishes were still in the sink. I was sipping coffee and scrolling through my phone as she sat there watching the rain outside. Then she said something very unexpected. Sometimes I forget I'm no longer married. I looked up. Not in a negative way, she proceeded. Just I spent years defining myself via that romance through what I was meant to be. Wife, mother, fixer. So now I'm just Melissa. That's not just anything, I said. She looked at me and smiled, the exhausted type that conveys more than words can express. I don't want to start over, she explained. I don't want a label or a big new chapter. I only want tranquility. I want to be around people that listen, someone who brightens the day. I nodded. You've got it. At least here you do. And then was the first time I could feel it clearly. We weren't working toward anything more. We were already who we needed to be. No expectations, no pressure, no illusions of forever. Just present support, real life. The next few weeks followed the same pattern. She came over whenever she wanted to. I did the same. We did have conversations on occasion. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes she cried after a long day with the kids. Sometimes I complained about work, but primarily we just lived near each other and it was enough. On a Sunday afternoon, I was watching a game on the couch. Melissa was sitting at the dining table assisting her daughter with homework. Her youngster was on the floor assembling something with Legos. The home sounded louder than usual, a little chaotic, but it felt warm. Lived in. Strange, right? Later, when everybody had left, I sat there in silence and I thought I didn't need anything else. I wasn't in love. Not the large cinematic sort, but I cared deeply. I know she did too. We'd never kissed, never held hands, never crossed the line, and we didn't have to. One evening, as she was leaving, she halted at the door and said, "Thank you for not expecting more than I can give." I said, "Thank you for giving me exactly what I needed." That was the final defining moment. After that, it was simply life ongoing, simple good. Months later, we are still here. She still lives across the street. We still see each other several times per week. Her children still call me Bigfoot from over there. Sometimes she brings over dinner. Sometimes I deliver additional groceries. Nobody in the neighborhood asks questions. They probably don't have to, because relationships don't always revolve around labels or outcomes. They are about timing, respect, quiet connection, and not everything has to be something greater. Sometimes this is sufficient. The story of Bigfoot and Melissa reveals a profound life lesson. Sometimes the most meaningful connections are built on quiet presence and genuine understanding, not grand gestures or defined labels. Melissa, burdened by a failing marriage, found solace in Bigfoot's willingness to simply listen, offering her a space to feel seen without judgment. Their bond, forged through shared moments, coffee on the porch, fixing a faucet, or installing backyard lights, shows that healing often comes from small, consistent acts of kindness. Bigfoot's journey teaches us that being there for someone, even in the simplest ways, can fill voids we didn't know existed, both for them and for ourselves. Their undefined relationship, rooted in mutual respect and emotional honesty, reminds us that life's deepest connections don't always need a name to be significant. It encourages us to show up for others, to embrace the beauty of human connection in its rawest form, and to find peace in the present without chasing a scripted future. What moments of quiet connection have shaped your life? Share your stories in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you found meaning in the everyday. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to join our community. Your support keeps these heartfelt tales alive. So let's continue this journey of discovery together.